So this HyFlex course delivery model, and HyFlex stands for hybrid flexible. This course delivery model accommodates multiple modalities, multiple delivery modalities, and also facilitates transitions between them. We are now very good at doing hybrid. But how good are we at being flexible? So let's look at what we are going to accomplish during this session. So we hope that by the end of this hour, you will be able to describe the HyFlex model. This is what it is, and this is what it is not. You will be able to determine the applicability of this model to your particular instructional content, your course, or how your department offers courses. And then if you decide that it is a good fit for what you are planning to do in the spring 2021, we hope that you will have an idea of how to develop an interactive lesson for students in multiple delivery modalities. And right now, it all may sound muddled up, but we hope that by the end of this session, we will achieve some clarity here. And so, Lydia, I'm now handing it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Vera. You know, we're going to start today by actually talking about and defining what is HyFlex delivery. And essentially, Beatty in 2019 defined it as a course design that enables a flexible participation policy for students, where students may choose to attend face-to-face, synchronously in class in person, online streaming, or completely online asynchronous. And in this HyFlex model, it allows for further choice on the online delivery mode, allowing for both synchronous and asynchronous options. You know, and so in our interpretation of this, as you can see on the slide, that we're accommodating those three different options. And in a traditional semester or in a traditional normal time, students do have that flexibility in the HyFlex model to move from one mode to the next. However, because we are in the middle of COVID, students really do need to stick with the modality that they signed up for. If they've signed up for a face-to-face class, of course they can move online. However, because of social distancing and space requirements, here at the university, we've set up a policy where students who are signed up for online classes may not go to an in-person class because there may not be seat capacity. So we wanted to just mention that very briefly in this situation. The one thing that we want you to get from this is that you too have some flexibility in these three choices, you know, and it's written from Beatty's perspective of students' flexibility, but however, you have that same flexibility also. So we hope that clarifies things a little bit for you. And we're just going to talk a little bit about course organization right now.
Okay, yes. So the three delivery modalities, face-to-face, online synchronous, and then online asynchronous, which means watching a class recording on demand whenever a student wishes to do that. So how do we organize a course like that? It's like juggling three different objects at the same time. And then your first question is probably, okay, well, what about learning outcomes and learning activities? Are they the same? Well, the answer to the questions about learning outcomes is yes, learning outcomes should be the same across all three delivery models. Now, when it comes to learning activities, that's where things become a little bit interesting. If you start reading online, you will find that or you will find answers like they can be the same, they can be different. So if they're different, they have to be comparable. They have to lead to the attainment of the same learning outcomes. And this is where you may feel overwhelmed. So three different delivery modalities and same learning outcomes. Do I have to develop three different sets of learning activities that would enable attainment of the same learning outcomes? And the flexible part kicks in when you consider where you start from. If you have taught this course in the classroom for years and years, you already have your learning activities and assessments. Now you need to rethink what the class time is, what actually constitutes learning, and how can students demonstrate attainment of the learning outcomes, of the learning objectives. And then we think about how we bring the three groups together. So learning activities can be the same for all three delivery modalities, or they can be different but comparable. Different but comparable is very difficult to achieve in your very first semester of teaching a HyFlex course. So over the summer, Lydia and I spent some time working together trying to figure out how to keep learning activities the same for all three delivery modalities. For the students who come to take your class face-to-face in the classroom, for those who view online synchronously, and for those who will view your class on demand. There is a way to keep the learning activities the same for all three groups, thus saving you a bunch of time. You don't have to develop three different sets of learning activities. So we hope that this makes you sigh with relief right now. The workload can be manageable. Now, during your live class session, we do really need you to engage, or the model really calls you to engage all three groups. Your class is taught in the classroom. You will have a small contingent of students right in front of you, so you need to engage those. You need to engage those who are watching you at the same time. And then we also have to figure out how to provide engagement for those who will watch you later. Remember that your class in this particular model needs to be recorded and posted for on-demand student access. Posting a recording is actually creates a very interesting situation, because even those students who attended your class face-to-face and interacted with you, or interacted with you online as they watched the synchronous broadcast, may still utilize those recordings for review and remediation. And then if your class, and your class certainly will be scheduled in multiple sections. Blackboard technicians can combine all those sections together on one site. So you don't have to do multiple postings of the same materials. And this combined Blackboard course will contain course materials for all three student groups, again, the same course materials for all three student groups, and also your online activities and assessments. The same online activities and assessments will be completed by students in all three student groups. So this is how we keep the learning experience pretty much the same for students in different delivery modalities. So this is just our first very brief introduction to what's going on in the hybrid flexible course. Okay, and now it is time for our first check-in with our workshop participants to see what's going on in the chat room. Do we have any questions or any comments just based on this very brief, very limited introduction to hybrid flexible model?
We do have one, Vera. A question in that case is how to take attendance and be equitable for all students. For example, if a synchronous student cannot connect on a certain day and watch the session on demand, should we consider that person present or absent?
That's a brilliant question. That's a brilliant question. And this is why we are introducing this model. Remember how we have three different deliveries: live face-to-face, live synchronous, and then watching the recording, the class recording after the class happens. So what is attendance? And the model itself says that students should have flexibility to move from one modality to the next. So at the beginning of in my hypothetical scenario, I'm a student who at the beginning of the semester will be face-to-face. I registered in the face-to-face section. I'm a conscientious student. I always come to class. So I start face-to-face. Then something happens, maybe exposure to COVID, maybe I got a flu, maybe some life circumstance occurs, and now I cannot be face-to-face with you. I watch online synchronously. I have that freedom to move from physical attendance to watching you online. But then something happens and I miss that class. There was an emergency. I can still attend the class by viewing the recording later. So do you count me absent or present? And the way Lydia and I conceptualize the whole thing is you don't need to count attendance in the classroom or during a live section. We propose that instead of doing that, you will set up online activities or assessments, little quizzes or questions that students can answer after each class. And by answering those questions, students will demonstrate their attendance and also whether they are getting it or not.
And that's what we really think too is the main point is, are they learning? You know, and we're so stuck sometimes in the traditional concept that attendance is a person attending and sitting in a seat, you know, and with this model, this helps alleviate honestly a little bit of burden from you, unless there's some sort of specific requirement that you do, your department or your program requires you to take attendance. We're all adults, and so your students are also in or transitioning into becoming adults. And so the main point is, can they really and truly apply what you're trying to teach? And that's where the online follow-up assessments will come into play. Is there anything else from anybody else out there? One challenge I encounter is the on-demand aspect. My class sessions are highly interactive and immersive with mostly small group work in PBL, while synchronous online can be accommodated with breakouts in Zoom. It isn't feasible to record small group sessions. So it sounds like encountering some problems with the technology being a limitation a little bit because of the synchronous live component and trying to do group work.
Well, and for this situation, yes, this is actually that difficult moment in this model. So because asynchronous attendance is also a legitimate way to attend class, we need to think through exactly what's happening in the classroom and whether or not, and how we look at it, how we interpret it. If, for example, and this is just a suggestion, if you interpret as what happens in the classroom, all your PBL activities, problem-based learning, if those activities that you complete in the classroom with your in-person students and your synchronous students are conceptualized as practice, and you provide a brief assessment of that practice during your live class, then after class there can be a small online follow-up activity similar to what you did in class. But this small online follow-up activity will now be completed by students in all three groups. And because it's similar to that problem that you solved in the classroom, your asynchronous people will now have the same chance to participate and demonstrate their competency or their attainment of the same learning objective. So practice during your live class session and then assess online after the class.
Sounds great, Vera. We had a couple other questions or comments about requirement of attendance, and I've posted some comments related to that in chat. And essentially here, we have programs that have different requirements. Attendance and participation is definitely something that is monitored, and they're appropriate. If somebody's not attending class, there are appropriate places to report that. But in online classes especially, activities, attendance and participation are synonymous in that you can have a weekly quiz or a discussion board that counts as attendance, because, and that's where we're going with that. Asks, can you include the activities like answering questions as part of the recorded lectures, or do we have to set up separate assignments? For example, are students able to do a quiz question while watching the lecture, or do you have to watch the lecture, go back to the module, and then start the quiz? And Vera, go ahead and answer.
Okay. I would again, and I thought through this long and hard, and I come from teaching Russian on satellite TV for 8.5 years over the entire country, at some point to 27 states. I would again approach what you do during your live class as practice, and strongly encourage participation and make it very engaging and interesting, and yet offer follow-up quizzes and follow-up questions and collect student answers either through a survey tool or through a testing tool, like you can set up a 2-question essay type quiz and count that as participation and attendance. In fact, we do in nursing, we do that in one of our online asynchronous courses. We have a case study that's stretched over 14 weeks of the semester, and to participate in the class, students have to submit answers to that case study. It's actually quite interesting and engagement. It's like a continuing story, like a soap opera. Students get so much into it. They get so emotionally involved. It creates such anticipation and excitement in the class. Everybody participates. But to submit intelligent answers that actually shows the effort, they have to watch the lecture, do the reading, think through the case study, and only then they submit. So there seems to be a very, this is a proven strategy to create attendance and participation. But then Blackboard, your course management system, will keep track of that. So you don't have to count people present in class, or pass these attendance sheets, or even count people present online, because that's really very difficult. So we hope that this will save you a little bit of that administrative work.
So I hope that totally answers your question. But we're also going to model some of these activities in the remainder of our time. And essentially and one thing with instructional design that we know, it's very important to chunk your information, break it down into smaller sections so that you have an appropriate amount of time for students to process and to learn a concept. So that's one thing that we're trying to do. For instance, we just now provided a lecture component at the very beginning explaining HyFlex. Vera's now checked in with everybody to see if y'all had any questions.
Planning and design.
And awesome. So with planning, we, as I mentioned earlier, are talking about breaking content and breaking down a class period into manageable chunks of time and information. And this includes having this active learning. Active learning, we do know, is extremely important. Engaging students is important because we know that the more you engage your students, the greater the student learning outcomes are in the long run. And with this type of model, continue to do that. One thing we want to make sure that nobody reverts back to is the strictly 50-minute lecture from the professor to their students. But these thinking moments, as opposed to full-blown active learning exercises in class, and you could still do that, but it might be that it's just reimagined in a different way. But that these are things that can start in class. You model what it is you want your students to do, and then it gives them practice. If you're in class or online, you can have students move through these thinking moments in practice. If you're a student who is watching it after the fact, they're watching how it was modeled. They're taking in the concepts intellectually. And you should also try and put in a comment in your lecture or in the session recording addressing the students that will be watching later. I know you're going to be watching. I have students that are going to be watching this later. While you're looking through how your classmates actually did this, think about how you're going to apply it yourself. So it's important to address all three audiences throughout your time. And then at the end, so essentially you have a introduction of content, you have a thinking moment activity, and then at the end of the class, you have follow-up online activities that you introduce towards the wrap-up time of your class.
Okay, and teaching live class sessions may be different. It's really strange now when you walk into classrooms, you see the instructor standing at the podium and then students kind of like thinly scattered throughout the room, and everybody has to wear a mask. Yes, classrooms now look and feel different. So if you are teaching, teaching in the live classroom, yes, we have an obligation to model the wearing of the mask, and some instructors also wear the clear face shield. That makes it a little more difficult for the students to hear, to understand exactly what you say, so you will need to slow down and enunciate clearly. You may also need to stay closer to the podium or at the podium so that the class is appropriately recorded for, review later. Having to stand at the podium and, handling the camera, and we already had a comment about how the microphones throughout the class do not pick up student voices very well. So yes, there will be loss of complex interactivity. If you know that ahead of time, then you can change how you conduct the class to compensate for that. We suggest again that all classes are recorded and posted later for review. This would take care of those situations that when students cannot be either physically present or for some reason they cannot be present online during class time. And now that watching class asynchronously is a legitimate way to attend class if that suits student circumstances better. It is difficult to teach, present new content, engage live audience, and also monitor the chat and kind of handle two things at the same time, or sometimes three things at the same time. So you will need assistance with monitoring the chat or assistance with technological aspects. So you can either recruit a student from the live audience or a colleague or have a teaching assistant assigned, but this aspect definitely needs to be thought through, how you will handle the technology during live class on top of teaching your content and conducting activities. And as you teach your live class, now this is the most difficult thing, it's keeping all three groups together. Your in-class people, those who watch the synchronous broadcast, and then keeping in mind that some students will be viewing you after the fact. Okay. And we already mentioned that, again, in our approach, which we think is very practical, very straightforward, a stripped down approach, students in all three groups will complete the same online activities after the class. And the completion of these activities will be counted as attendance and participation. So these after-class activities should contribute only a small percentage to the course grade, so we are not trying to inflate the grade here at all. But they will be, these activities should be computer captured, so to speak, quizzes and say surveys or submission of answers to case studies. They are captured by the computer, and it's easy to see who is participating and who is not participating, who is attending the class and who is not attending the class. Because you are including thinking moment activities during your live class, you are providing an incentive to either come to class physically or view it synchronously, so that nothing is being lost. You are, in fact, providing an incentive to attend. And you are providing practice for everybody. But because we are now moving out some of the activities from the class time to after class, during the next class period, you need to briefly go over those activities and let students know what you see. Is everybody doing well? Do you now see that some students are not completing those activities? Or do you see that students are not quite mastering the ways of thinking and you need them to pay attention to, specific details? And by talking about those online activities during your live class, you again provide an incentive to complete, because you are talking about their work. So we hope that, again, this is now beginning to make a little bit more sense to you. And now Lydia will provide examples of or online follow-up activities.
And these are not necessarily meant to be, like Vera said, a lot of additional work for any of your students. So it's not to add additional time, or these would be considered what you would normally consider homework assignments, for instance. These could be quick little knowledge checks, such as two to five little quiz items, a micro essay where students write 100 words or less, a reflection question, which is you pose a concept in class and then students think about how it applies to them. Something quick and simple that they could synthesize everything and then see how it applies. Any scenario responses, the case studies, the role playing, it could be through a discussion board. You assign everybody a different role and they respond to how in that role they would apply what they're learning. But these are not meant to add additional work to anybody, to you or to them. And honestly, anytime that you can have Blackboard grade something for you, even if it's little knowledge checks, let Blackboard do that for you. The reflection question should be easy and something quick for you just to quickly read through. You don't want 10-page papers here. You're not trying to overinflate grades or to do anything of that sort. So don't add extra work to yourself. Keep it as simple as possible while still trying to ensure that your students are getting what they're needing. Now we are transitioning back into part 3 of our workshop. We have about 20 more minutes to go, Vera. And so I think this is yours.
Okay, yes. And managing logistics. Since we now have 3 audiences, this is that part that can create an increase in the workload. But if you plan out everything in advance, then you can more or less control all that busy work. So we do recommend that if you teach in multiple sections, just to cut down on the on instructor functions. You ask our Blackboard technicians to merge sections in Blackboard. This way you have your three audiences studying on the same website. Increase transparency. In class, students see exactly what the asynchronous students will see, so you are not hiding anything. Plan to get assistance with technology. We are now teaching in this high-tech environment, and we have already determined in this session it is hard to juggle multiple things at the same time. So we need assistance with technology. So teaching assistants or more instructors assigned to courses, that's where we need to be going at this point. The next point says provide instructions to students in writing in Blackboard. So if somebody is coming to class in person, this is what is expected of you. This is how I recommend you approach your study process. Spell it out. If you are watching the class synchronously, again, this is what's expected of you. This is how you should approach it. And now probably the longest list of instructions will pertain to those students who will choose to view the class asynchronously after the fact. To demonstrate participation, you need to do this and that. You definitely need to watch the recording. The first time, watch the entire recording. If you feel you are missing something, then you can, watch specific parts to demonstrate your attendance and participation. You absolutely have to complete these activities, etc., etc. I will be offering Q&A sessions outside of the class, like office hours. Come to these sessions and engage with your group members. And many many other points. So again, if you have access to an instructional designer, don't hesitate to ask for advice, because articulating these instructions on how to approach learning will take time, but they always pay off greatly in the end. And then please remember to record class and post the recording for all students to review, because even those conscientious students who always show up face-to-face or always show up for a live class, they may need some remediation, and it's having a recording available is a really good learning enhancer. Okay. Now, how do you keep everybody connected? You are teaching in the live classroom. So how do you keep everybody connected and everybody feeling that they are being cared for? So we suggest that, you talk in a dialogic manner, ask questions, pause briefly, and then you can proceed to answer your question. This is just how our brain works. Each time we hear a question, subconsciously we begin to formulate an answer. This may even take like a fraction of a second, but it still happens. So we can utilize this rhetoric approach. Build thinking moment activities, and in this session we try to demonstrate how those can be incorporated. So if you pose the question, then you can call on your students right in front of you to start providing an answer. And you can also ask for live synchronous participants to start typing their answers in the chat. And then you can swap whom you call on first. So with this question, let's see what our chat participants are saying. And now in the chat we have this question. So how would you answer this? Let's hear from our classroom audience. And this way you have two audiences interacting with each other and everybody feels engaged. And then at the end of the class, please introduce those follow-up activities. So in the class today, we practiced with how to do XYZ. So right after the class, I want you to provide a quick solution to this problem. And it is posted, on the course management system in that particular spot. I also want you to take a short quiz that will help you remember the main concepts, the main ideas from today's class. And this helps the students to self-assess their learning, and that shows to you that students are learning and processing ideas. And then you can debrief the results of those quick online follow-up activities during the next class. And you can begin by saying, well, I see that everybody really mastered these concepts well, and now you can solve these types of problems. So let's continue exploring, etc., etc. If there are some really great answers, you can even provide exemplars of best student submissions. And when you recognize that the instructor is actually quoting your work, oh, yes, this makes students glow all over.
So one thing that we did do is provide a worksheet that you could possibly use to outline exactly what you want your class to be. We do, and Vera mentioned early on that planning is crucial. And in today's activity, we broke this workshop down into 3 what we consider lecture parts, with 2 thinking moment activities. And we're calling them thinking moment activities to give people the time to think, and that's so needed. But it is really and truly an active learning exercise that you're wanting to go through. But again, if you pre-registered, you were provided this worksheet, and after today's workshop, we're also going to remail everything out to y'all, so that you and for anybody else who joined without registration, so that you have this at your disposal. So, but we think in terms of, as designers, 15 to 20 minute increments, and that is about the right amount of time, so that nobody really and truly starts. It's enough time so that people can process what is being covered, but we also start daydreaming and losing attention span after about 6 minutes. So try and get one concept in, and provide opportunities for practice. And if you have a 50-minute session, if your class is only 50 minutes, you might only be able to do 1 active learning exercise in the middle. And that's quite okay. You don't feel like you have to cram in 60 minutes of content into a 50-minute class. In a 50-minute class, you really and truly probably only have 35 to 40 minutes of activity time, lecturing plus activity. If you think you're going to have a 5-minute intro and then a 5-minute outro, then or wrap up time. So, but you'll have these resources if you don't have them already. So Vera's going to take it over from here.
Okay, so let's hear voices from the trenches. And these are student voices, voices of the students who are now studying in the HyFlex or HyFlex-ish model. In the College of Nursing, we do midterm evaluations on our online asynchronous courses, and also by demand from those instructors who are interested to find out what is happening in the trenches in the middle of the semester. And currently we have this course being taught, Evolution of Nursing. This is Nursing 212, so it's first semester sophomore year. The course is really large. It's the total population is 362 students. The survey was conducted online, and we got a really nice response rate of 61%. So we got 222 responses. So quite nice for a fully online survey. And of course, no points, no brownie points for completing this. Just be nice and give us feedback. So we asked, in what format are you currently taking this class? Because we can't really go by how students registered. There's some migration that occurred over the first few weeks of the semester. So we asked. And notice that the majority are saying online through Zoom in real time, more than 83%. Then we have a small group that is still coming to class, but very few of them are coming to class at this point. And then we have a small group who are viewing class recordings later. But again, the majority, more than 80%, are utilizing synchronous online broadcast. We also asked, well, how do you feel about the amount of learning in this course compared to the traditional classroom course? Now, these are sophomore students, and they have not yet developed that self-direction, self-regulation, self-efficacy in the learning process. So like 27% of them are saying learning less than in the traditional classroom, but then there's the majority of them, about 62%, are saying they are learning the same amount. And there's a small group of about 11% who say, I'm learning more. I'm learning more than I would in the traditional classroom course. So very interesting. There were several open-ended questions on that survey. So we asked, in what format are you taking the course? We wanted to know why. Why did they make these choices? So why are you taking the class in the format that you identified? And the reasons are really neat. So 8:30 is too early. So this student decided to attend it online, and they feel there's no difference in learning. I'm not disadvantaged when I learn over Zoom or at my own time instead of going in person. The next comment is very interesting. After attending a few in-person sections, I felt like I was getting a very similar experience online. So this should make us think about what is the value added in coming to class. Because it can be very discouraging to an instructor to see that fewer and fewer students are coming to the live class face-to-face. A large number of students are simply terrified of catching COVID, and they don't want to pass it on to their loved ones, so they are preferring to stay away from campus for safety reasons. And there's a very large group of students who acknowledge that they definitely focus better in person. But this comment is really very interesting. I definitely focus better in person. However, I'm a slow writer and thinker. So this student discovered that recordings actually provide a better learning environment for them, allowing me to pause the video as needed to stop and take notes without having to rush or confuse myself. So these recordings are a great remediation tool. Okay, let's look at a few more comments. So again, the first comment shows you how important those recordings are and how students are really utilizing them as a useful study tool. And the last comment here is, I think the course format is perfect. I think in the future, if things go back to in-person classes, I think it's important to remember that technology is our friend. This format of live Zooms is perfect for traveling athletes. This way, they can connect their laptops to a hotspot and still attend class. The post recordings make it even better for student athletes when they are traveling by plane. It has been very nice this semester being an athlete. Isn't that interesting? Out of the mouth of babes. It has been very nice this semester being an athlete. I have been able to view and attain all information given in lectures, and I have not fallen behind due to having to miss classes. So these are the voices that under normal circumstances we would have never heard because we would not have asked. Now COVID changed things, and we are now teaching these classes under the circumstances that are not very comfortable for us as educators, but some interesting things are happening on the student side of things. And these are not, so there are some positive things that are happening. Students are now having more choices, more freedom in how to attend class, and these comments show us that they're using these choices responsibly. And I'm not going to deny that there are probably instances when students are falling through the cracks. They are not as engaged as they might be in the traditional class. They are not using the choices. They're not making the wisest choices. But there's a lesson for us all in this situation as to, now that we know that these positive things are happening, how do we capture them and what do we do moving forward? Is HyFlex only suitable for a crisis-like situation right now when we are thrust into a mode of delivery that we may not be comfortable with? But with all these really interesting positive things happening for the students, how do we move forward? Did we learn anything new about ourselves and our students? And what do we do with this new knowledge in the future?